Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to NEEP's webinar on implementing CAP and invest programs. If you go to the next slide, please. Great, thank you. Before we get started, I just want to give you a little background on NEEP, or the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships. NEEP is a regional energy efficiency organization, or RIO. We specifically work throughout the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast to drive market transformation regionally by fostering collaboration and innovation, developing tools, and disseminating knowledge. Before we get started, I'd like to give a big thanks to our funders, who are, next slide, as well as our network of allies and state partnerships. These relationships really help to guide and develop our work in the region. And next slide. Great, thank you. And with that, I will officially start our presentation on CAP and invest programs. This is the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships Policy Framework webinar series on implementing energy efficiency programs. This is actually the third webinar in our series where we're going to take a deep dive on CAP and invest. And just to give you a little bit of introduction on myself, my name is Erin Cosgrove, and I am the Public Policy Manager here at NEEP. And I work across our region to help advise states and advocates on how to implement decarbonization goals through energy efficiency work and how to center those programs on equity. Next slide. As I said, this is the third in our policy webinar series, and here's just a little outline. And for those of you also attending the webinar today, we'll send the slides out, which includes hyperlinks to these past webinar series. In June, we had a webinar and an implementation guide on cost benefit tests. Back in August, we did a deep dive on energy efficiency retrofits with a webinar and implementation guide on them. And then finally, to finish the year off, we will be talking about CAP and invest policies. And today I will introduce our new implementation guide, and then also we'll have a great discussion on how these policies are implemented across the US. Next slide. Great, so just before I get started, I wanted to share this new NEEP resource that is available online to give a preview of this policy. I also would like to give a shout out to Chase McPherson, who is running the background of the show, and an intern here at NEEP who helped me write this implementation guide. But basically, this implementation guide looks at the fact that states are setting climate goals that will require whole sectors of industry to drastically decarbonize. And cap and invest policies can actually be a great tool to regulate carbon emissions in industry without forcing specific solutions. So our brief dives into how states can implement these policies either statewide or also regionally, which we have both in the United States. And so the brief goes through what are cap and invest policies, what sectors can be kept by these policies, how to use these investments to then accelerate decarbonization, and then also ways to center equity and invest in a clean energy workforce. In implementing these policies, it's important to remember that cap and invest programs are market-based. And so this webinar is going to look at how states have used these market mechanisms to both drive down emissions and achieve climate goals and invest in communities. If we go to the next slide. We have a great outline of our panelists today. So we have three great panelists that will discuss these policies, and we'll be looking specifically at California and Washington, which actually use cap and invest to achieve statewide emission goals across many sectors. And then we'll also take a dive into Pennsylvania and Maine, both who take part in a regional cap and invest program used to regulate carbon emissions. And then finally, I want to highlight we will have a Q&A session, hopefully 20 to 30 minutes. But because this is a webinar, you will be muted, but there is a Q&A feature on the bottom that you can use to add questions throughout the presentation. Also within the Q&A feature, there's an upvote feature. So if you see a question you like or you would like to get answered, you can click the upvote, which basically operates like a like button. And then finally, I just want to highlight that there are captions happening at the bottom of the screen, and you can turn those on and off, I believe, if you hit the CC button. And with that, I will go into our first presenter. So I'd like to introduce Caitlin Rodner-Sutter, Senior Manager of U.S. Climate at the Environmental Defense Fund. A little background on them. The Environmental Defense Fund's mission is to preserve the natural systems on which all life depends, guided by science and economics. They find practical and lasting solutions to the most serious environmental problems. Caitlin leads the Environmental Defense Fund's climate work in California, as well as regulatory and legislative initiatives on climate across the Western United States. And Caitlin's focus is on advancing policies that establish and implement long-term greenhouse gas emission reductions and improve local air quality. And with that, I will introduce Caitlin and turn it over to her.
Thanks so much, Erin. I really appreciate that and appreciate the invitation to be with you all today. So thank you. I'm going to speak a little bit about Cap and Invest in California, how it works, some of the challenges, the state's progress in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and then I think at some point we can talk quick about Washington State as well. The first thing I want to do is just address terminology really quickly. California has always used the term cap and trade, and I'm going to try very hard to say cap and invest. I do think in California's program, you could use either because there is both trading and a huge amount of investment. So if I slip into cap and trade, I am not talking about a different policy. It's just old habits die hard. And then the second thing I want to start off by saying is that, you know, California has dozens of climate and energy policies. I'm going to talk about the unique and important role of cap and invest, but it is not the only policy. And it is really important to remember that cap and invest has to work amongst a suite of policies that target very specific sectors or subsectors or pollutants. So I guess those are my two quick framing comments to keep in mind as I go into this. Next slide, please, Chase. Thanks. So this is a pretty simplified version. If you want more detail, the link there on the slide goes to a 10-step summary of California's program that I hope is still pretty digestible and might be a good resource alongside the implementation guide. But cap and invest is a market-based mechanism to drive greenhouse gas reductions. It covers you know, carbon dioxide, methane, et cetera. It does not cover particulate matter or ozone or most of the what we would call local pollutants that have immediate health impacts, but it does cover about 75% of California's global pollutants. And the cap is the essential feature of the program. That's a firm limit on pollution. It declines every year, and it declines in line with legally binding science-based greenhouse gas reduction targets. So the cap is basically the declining trajectory from current emissions to where we need emissions to be in say 2030. Based on that limit, the regulator with CARB, the California Air Resources Board, issues allowances equal to 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. And they only issue enough allowances to stay under the cap. So for instance, in 2021, the cap is about 320 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So CARB only issues 320 million allowances. Next year, the cap goes down to 307. So there's fewer allowances issued. And the year after that, it's even lower and there are fewer allowances. Covered entities have to hold 1 allowance for every ton of their greenhouse gas emissions. And these entities are power plants, refineries, electricity and fuel importers, manufacturers, food processors, et cetera. Small sources are not covered, like your local gas station is not covered. It's the refinery that's covered. And then sectors like natural and working lands are not covered. Some entities get a percentage of their allowances for free from the Air Resources Board in order to prevent leakage, you know, them leaving the state. And the rest of the allowances are auctioned off. And that's how the state has raised almost $17 billion through cap and trade. Entities that need more allowances than what they may receive for free have to buy them at auction or from other facilities. And that's the trading part. And that's where the price on carbon comes in. And that price is set based on the supply and demand of allowances. As a data point for you, the most recent auction was this past November, and allowances sold for just over $28, which was actually a record high auction price. And then at the end of the year, emissions data is turned in. The regulator verifies with independent third-party verifiers all the facilities' emission reports. Those facilities turn in allowances equal to their emissions, and basically then the process starts all over again the next year with the cap and allowances and all of that. Next slide, please, Chase. The biggest, the most important feature from EDF's perspective of a cap and invest program is that firm cap on greenhouse gas emissions. All of California's climate programs contribute to staying below the cap, but a well-designed cap provides the greatest possible certainty of meeting a specific level of greenhouse gas emissions by a certain point in time, which is needed to comply with statutory emission reduction goals. It's basically the backstop. Think about it that way. If other policies reduce a lot of emissions, then there's less pressure on the cap. There's lower demand for allowances, there's a lower carbon price. But if those other policies don't achieve the intended reductions, then the cap is the backup, because that cap is enforced by the finite declining number of allowances and make sure that emissions don't rise above a certain level. Cap and invest also provides some flexibility, which can help keep costs lower for businesses. And we care about keeping costs manageable because we don't want businesses to leave the state, taking jobs with them and just polluting somewhere where there are no regulations. And if the cost of reducing emissions is relatively low, we actually can increase the ambition of our policy and get more emission reductions. Cap and invest can also be linked to other cap and invest programs, and a larger market can also enable much more significant emission reductions faster. And then, of course, cap and invest raises a lot of money for important projects. I mentioned we're at about $17 billion in California for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And about half of that has been invested in the state's overburdened communities. Next slide, please. The other side is that cap and invest only covers greenhouse gas emissions. Like I said, it does not cover localized pollutants that cause health problems. And the state of California needs to do a lot more on controlling local air pollution. And the cap and invest program isn't really designed to fix local air quality. With the flexibility of cap and invest, it's actually possible for a specific facility to increase their emissions as long as they can buy the allowances to cover those emissions. And as a state, we are still below the cap because we only have a certain number of allowances available, but there may not be a decrease in local pollution in a particular neighborhood around a certain factory. And that is obviously a problem, and cap and invest is not designed to fix that problem. There's also a lot of concern about the use of offsets for similar reasons. The state has really cut back on the number of offsets that are allowed to be used and specified that half of those that are used have to directly benefit the state. But there's still concern that if polluters are buying offsets instead of reducing emissions on site, that does nothing to help local air pollution. Next slide, please, Chase. So one of the responses to those concerns was legislation that was adopted in 2017, the Community Air Protection Program, which did several things. It increased fines for air quality violations, which, believe it or not, had not been increased since the 1970s. So this was actually a really big deal. It also accelerated the timeline for facilities to install best available retrofit control technology. But most significantly, it developed a community-based, community-driven program to address cumulative pollution burden in the most overburdened communities. So rather than focusing on just one pollutant or one source, it is the holistic impact of pollution from all sources of all kinds on a community, which was a pretty significant step forward. Next slide, please. Thanks. The good news is California has met its 2020 emission reduction goal 4 years ahead of schedule, which is huge. I mean, it's great news. At the same time, the state's population grew. The state is producing more and polluting less. So the carbon intensity of the economy has declined, which is good. This chart is a little bit out of date, but these trends have held through 2019. Obviously, early data with the pandemic is a little wonky, but these trends have held for the last several years. And I think, though, what needs to be made clear is because California has so many different programs, some of which do overlap, and some of the same emitters have to comply with multiple programs, it is very difficult to say which ton of emission reductions comes from which specific policy. So I cannot say that cap and invest is responsible for all of these emission reductions, but I can say that a well-designed cap keeps California on the right trajectory to meet our goals. It is also true that while California has been successful, the state has to do much more to reach the 2030 goal, which is significantly more ambitious than the 2020 goal. We need to increase the ambition of a lot of policy that we have. We need to make this all important emissions cap more stringent, which means fewer allowances, to ensure that we meet the next climate goal. So what California has been doing has worked, but obviously the climate crisis is accelerating, so we have more work to do, and a well-designed cap is a really important part of that. And I think with that, I am hopefully not too far over time. I will stop and pass the mic to Bill.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Caitlin. Yes, next up, we're going to hop over to the East Coast, and we're going to talk about something called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which some of you might be familiar with, but I'm just going to give a little background before we dive into Pennsylvania and Maine. So the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI, is a cooperative effort among Eastern states to reduce carbon dioxide emissions from power plants within each participating state. It sets a regional cap, but then it distributes the proceeds to the individual states to spend as they would like. And since RGGI has actually started, it has reduced emissions from this sector from the electricity power plant sector by more than 50% and raised over $4 billion in investment. And with that introduction, I'm going to ask Bill to please turn on his camera. Bill Cousins will talk to us about how RGGI can help achieve environmental gains in Pennsylvania, but also some of the compromises these policies can mean for environmental justice focused coalitions. Bill volunteers with Power Interfaith as the chair of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative campaign. Power Interfaith stands for Philadelphians organized to witness, empower, and rebuild, but I do have to caution that they now might stand for Pennsylvania organized to witness, empower, and rebuild as they are expanding. Power is an interfaith, multiracial people's movement of over 50 Pennsylvania congregations committed to racial and economic justice on a livable planet, and they help to equip community leaders with the skills needed to reach out into their neighborhoods, identify common concerns, research possible solutions, and work with public officials and private businesses to put these solutions into effect. And with that, I will pass it over to Bill.
Thank you very much, Erin. I appreciate the introduction. And also, I really appreciate Caitlin's overview of the success they've had in California, especially with the multiple complementary programs that California has. Chase, you could go to the next slide, which is just an overview. I'm going to try to address something about the Pennsylvania context for RGGI. As Erin's little map showed, Pennsylvania is not yet a member of RGGI. We've had an effort underway for about 2 years now to join RGGI. And that still is, as you'll see in some of my later slides, that still is a struggle that is ongoing. I'll talk a little bit about Power Interfaith's perspective on decarbonization and equity and the issues that that raises. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the successes that we've had so far, and also some of the prospects we see going forward, hopefully with RGGI getting implemented in Pennsylvania. Next slide, Chase, please. A little bit about Pennsylvania, and here I am so envious of California because Pennsylvania is really very, in some respects, very in terms of its energy and climate policies. The state has a very strong legacy of coal mining and coal use for electricity generation. We have been one of the main areas where the hydraulic fracturing has grown exponentially, I think, and to the point that Pennsylvania is now second only to Texas for natural gas extraction from both conventional wells and the fracked gas hydraulic fracturing wells. And a fair amount of that gas is getting burned in combustion turbine electric generation. The state is very divided politically. You know, we get referred to as a purple state because our population is roughly divided Democratic and Republican. We currently have a Democratic governor, and both houses of our state legislature are controlled by the Republican Party. The fossil fuel interests are very strong, especially in the state legislature. There's a joke that goes around, which I don't think is very far from the truth, that there are as many oil and gas lobbyists in Harrisburg, our state capital, as there are state legislators. So, and our regulation of the monies that legislators can receive is one that allows a lot of contributions from those lobbyists. And so there's strong influence from the fossil fuel industry in Harrisburg. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative in Pennsylvania was introduced under an existing legislative authority, something called the Air Pollution Control Act. The effort to implement RGGI is strongly supported by the public. We have like 70% poll support for addressing climate change, and RGGI itself polls very well in public opinion surveys. But largely, I think, due to the influences of the fossil fuel industry, we have ongoing legislative opposition to going forward with RGGI and potential legal challenges even when the regulations go into effect. Next slide, please. Power Interfaith, our approach, we would like to see decarbonization, but it's important that there be strong equity provisions in whatever is put in place. As Erin said, we're a multi-faith organization, really working on multiple issues addressing economic justice, but stressing economic justice on a livable planet. Our climate justice and jobs team is one of several different areas that Power addresses. We also have teams looking at educational funding, economic equity, and a program addressing policing, criminal justice, and mass incarceration. Our RGGI campaign is part of that climate justice and jobs team, and we feel that the populations we represent want a voice in where the money that is realized from RGGI goes, how it's used to address the suffering in economic justice communities, how we can build a just transition to a green economy, both for the workers that might be displaced and for the communities that are impacted by the fossil fuel industry. We work in coalition with other organizations, both frontline communities and other advocacy groups. And at a state level, we refer to ourselves as being part of this climate equity table. Next slide, please. Our objectives, our equity objectives with RGGI, we want to ensure that the proceeds get invested in and benefit environmental justice communities. And we can talk in our discussion session what is meant by an environmental justice community. We feel the monies that are realized from the auction proceeds should redress past harms, There's a lot of data indicating that, as a result of burning fossil fuels, we have both environmental and health effects that adversely affect people, especially in these environmental justice communities. We need to protect against rising electricity prices. A concern is that through RGGI, prices may go up. And so it's important that monies from RGGI get spent on improving energy efficiency, weatherization programs, and other policies that would address the rising prices. And we should acknowledge that the burdens that are experienced by Black, Brown, and Indigenous peoples, not just in urban areas, but across the entire state, be addressed. Next slide. RGGI is not implemented yet in Pennsylvania. We have not yet joined the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. There are some promising indicators. After much lobbying and public testimony from our members, as well as other people concerned about justice issues, the preamble to the regulations include these equity principles, which are considered guidelines, so they're not binding, but they must gather and consider input from the public related to decisions made under RGGI. They have to protect health and welfare, especially mitigating adverse effects, especially in these environmental justice communities. And RGGI must work equitably and with intention to distribute environmental and economic benefits of the RGGI proceeds from the allowance auctions. Their final rule includes an emission measurement requirement, which we think will be key because this will allow people working on evaluation to determine whether areas of the state are disproportionately impacted by increased air pollution. As Caitlin indicated, in California, you can still, even though overall pollution may be reduced, there still may be communities, for example, where power plants are located that still are suffering adverse effects from the remaining fossil-fired generation. So it's important that we have this data. However, the regs don't specify any required mitigation. So that's an area that will still need attention as we go forward. Next slide. The way RGGI is set up under the Clean Air Act, 50% of the proceeds from the RGGI allowance auctions will go to the state's Clean Air Fund. 50% will remain under the control of the state legislature. And for that 50% under that are going to the Clean Air Fund, the Department of Environmental Protection will be issuing separate regulations, which have not, even the drafts of those have not yet been released. And although they're promising public comment and public hearings on how these funds are going to be allocated. And again, our priority is that as much of those funds as possible go to these environmental justice communities. There is also legislation that has been introduced called the RGGI Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative Investments Act. And that would add 2 additional funds to the Clean Air Fund for disbursement of RGGI proceeds. There would be an Energy Communities Trust Fund, and energy communities are defined as areas where there has been either coal mining, natural gas, fracking, extraction, or operation of either coal or gas-fired power plants. So this money would address dislocation that might result from the closure or cutting back of the operation of any of those plants. And then the Environmental Justice Communities Trust Fund would have dedicated money going to these environmental justice communities, communities with both a combination of low income, concentration of minority households, and where pollution has been concentrated. I will stop there and turn it over back to Erin and then to Jack. We have more discussion we can get into on some of the equity issues that I think RGGI and these cap and invest programs raise, but thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Bill. And as Bill said, we will definitely get into more discussion about equity around RGGI, and I'll use this to also remind everyone to please put any questions you have into the Q&A. And now, if we can go to the next slide, I will introduce Jack Shapiro. Jack is the Climate and Clean Energy Director at the National Resources Council of Maine. The National Resources Council of Maine is a nonprofit membership organization protecting, restoring, and conserving Maine's environment now and for future generations, originally founded in 1959, so they've been around for a while. Jack leads the Climate and Clean Energy team that is working in support of policies that address climate change and the threats that it poses to Maine's environment and communities. And with that, I will hand it over to Jack.
All right, awesome, Erin. Thank you, and thanks, Caitlin and Bill, for your presentations as well. And we can go right to the next slide here. So Maine was an original participant in RGGI. Bipartisan majority in the legislature voted to join in 2007. And participating in RGGI has had really great benefits for Maine. This includes climate benefits, health benefits, energy cost savings, and other economic benefits. Beyond the reducing greenhouse gas emissions, Maine is a downwind state, quote unquote. So reductions in air pollution elsewhere in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic do have significant benefits here. Now, digging in a little bit to the last sort of full economic analyses we have of RGGI benefits here in Maine, looked at the specific period of 2015 to 2017. Sometimes these big analyses sort of lag in the data, but they found that RGGI added $92 million in economic value to Maine and created nearly 1,000 jobs just in a 3-year period. And a lot of that is because RGGI is bringing a lot of investment back into our state. Maine's total auction proceeds from RGGI total about $143 million. That includes the last auction at the beginning of December. Now, that's not quite the billions on billions that California is working with, but Maine is a small state, so that has a pretty big impact here. Efficiency Maine, which I'll talk about in just a second, they're the entity that administers RGGI's funds here in Maine. They estimate that over the next 3 fiscal years, we're also seeing rising auction prices like California has been, but they're expecting that RGGI proceeds will total another $45.8 million over the next 3 full fiscal years. And to give a sense of what the impact of that is, over the lifetime of the investments made just in one fiscal year, FY 2019, it's expected that those RGGI funded investments will lower participants' energy bills by more than $36 million. And so that's about a 4-to-1 payback for those investments. So talking a little bit about Efficiency Maine, and I think we can go to the next slide. No worries, Chase, no worries at all. But you can see a little bit, and sorry if it's a little bit small here, but a little bit about Efficiency Maine. It's a quasi-government entity that administers efficiency programs and also a lot of other things. They also administer, for example, the Volkswagen diesel settlement funds and do EV rebates and EV charging programs. They work with the PUC to evaluate non-wires alternatives to proposed utility grid distribution upgrades and a whole bunch of different things. But RGGI funds have historically been a core source of funding for some of their some of the mainstays of their programming, including some of the ones that you see here: residential efficiency programs, heat pumps, which we'll talk about as well. And they also do things like custom commercial and industrial programs. So some of the large energy users in Maine, they'll work directly with them to figure out how they can install more more efficient equipment at those facilities to save on energy and on costs overall. And you can go to the next slide. So Efficiency Maine has been, like I said, they've been doing this work for a long time now. And some of the keys to their success here, they have really, really strong marketing, direct to business and direct to consumer. They have long-standing partnerships with retailers and with equipment distributors. For example, the suppliers that supply contractors with heat pump water heaters, for example, they work closely with all those folks across Maine. Great relationships with vendors, the folks that actually go out and do home energy audits and building envelope sealing, all of those kinds of things. They do technical assistance and training. They provide all of those rebates. We are just in the process of buying a new house, and we're looking forward to getting, to taking advantage of some of those rebates to do some initial air sealing on what will be our 150-year-old home. But one thing I want to highlight here is their cost benefit test. And for those of you who are on the June webinar, you probably know, you might even know more about that than me. But one of the ways that Efficiency Maine has been able to keep their work steady and durable across different administrations and in different political contexts here in Maine, notably the LePage administration was openly hostile to climate and clean energy policy. But Efficiency Maine was able to, they worked really hard to justify all of their programming through pretty strong cost effectiveness tests, which then go before the Public Utilities Commission and are evaluated and approved. So that's one of the ways that they have been able to keep their work going outside the political winds of change. Next slide. One particular piece to highlight is the heat pump program, which is part of their home energy savings program. Heat pumps are a really important part of our energy picture in Maine. We have an enormous dependence on heating oil here. More than 60% of households' primary heat source is still oil, highest in the country. And people are really exposed to fossil fuel price volatility here. The volatility that we're seeing on pricing right now is having a huge impact here, both that 60% that I talked about on oil, but there's another 15% that heat with propane, another about 8 or 9% on utility gas. And heat pumps, those that are heating with electricity now, are far less exposed to that volatility and can really take advantage of the sort of inherent efficiency in heat pump technology. Also, heat pumps also provide cooling, which is important in Maine as we look forward. Traditionally, we did not have extreme heat days in Maine, but we're starting to see that with the change in climate. And only about 50% of Maine households have access to any kind of air conditioning right now. Now, there's huge equity flags with all of the above things. Maine is a low-income state, a big rural population. It's older, so there are a lot of seniors and low-income Mainers that really can be catastrophically impacted by a surge in fossil fuel pricing as we go into a winter like we're about to see. The Maine, as part of our climate action plan, which came out last year, has a goal of 100,000 heat pumps installed across Maine by 2025. And last year, Efficiency Maine installed 28,000 heat pumps, which is double the previous year, putting us on track as a state to meet the goal of 100,000 heat pumps installed by 2025. So I think one of the takeaways here to highlight is that for RGGI, for this particular multi-state cap and invest program, really the investment of those of the dollars coming back from the program are really up to the states. Some states use them for Bill outlined sort of how they were looking at doing this in Pennsylvania. Some states just put it straight towards rate relief to lower electricity rates for consumers. Here in Maine, we've decided to put it through this particular structure that we have of this quasi-government entity that does these efficiency programs. So that's really one of the benefits of RGGI for us, and it's been hugely successful here. So I'll also stop there, and I think we can get to questions.
Great. Yes, thank you so much, Jack. And we can turn the PowerPoint off for now, and then I'll invite Bill and Caitlin to turn their cameras on. And also just want to remind all the attendees that if there's any specific questions you have for our panelists, feel free to put them in the Q&A, raise issues in the chat. We have people from an array of different states here that I think have a wealth of knowledge we could tap into. And while we wait to see if any questions come in, I'm going to take us back to the equity conversation that everyone referenced in their presentations. And Bill, I'm going to specifically ask you this first question because of the work that you do at Power. Looking for, I guess, like if you had recommendations to either update RGGI or for other states that might even be looking to do what California did by creating their own state cap and invest program. What would you, or what would groups like Power most likely recommend putting in from the start of these programs or modifying? Oh, you're muted.
There we go.
There we go.
I think that is probably the most common set of words in the Zoom world is, you're still muted. So, but in any case, to answer your question, I think the critical thing really is that groups that are concerned with equity really pay attention to the regulatory process that your state, both the legislative process for adopting a cap and invest program, and then the details of the regulations that are written to implement that cap and invest program, that you need to focus on where the money is going to go and how it's going to get spent. And you want to ensure that people who have been suffering the adverse effects of our unclean, our dirty fossil energy system, whether it's economic adverse effects or health effects, that they see some of the benefits. And also because a cap and invest program can raise the cost of electricity. In the RGGI states, that's an issue. That a portion of the money go to programs that will allow people to realize savings in their electricity bills. So it might be, as in Maine, heat pumps. It could be actual rebates on rates. It could be energy efficiency, weatherization programs, and other steps to improve energy efficiency. I mean, I think that's, in Pennsylvania, that's an area that we really want to see targeted. We have a lot of, in urban areas, a large portion of households are renter-occupied households. So how do you ensure that the money realized from the RGGI proceeds go to support those households as well as homeowner households? I'll stop there.
Oh, thank you so much, Bill. I'm also so happy that you tied it back to weatherization and heat pumps. Also something very near and dear to me. And sticking with the equity conversation, I want to now turn over to Caitlin, because Caitlin, while she talked to us about California, has also actually worked in Washington. And Washington, the state, just passed a cap and invest program, and they have some I believe it's built-in equity considerations. And Caitlin, I know you gave us slides for this, so if you want to get those going, we can do that also. But if you could expand a little bit more on what Washington is doing and what you've seen there.
Yeah, absolutely. So earlier this year, Washington adopted what they call the Climate Commitment Act, and it creates a cap and invest program that looks very similar to California. So a lot of what I just talked through also applies to California. But they made a few important adjustments sort of for their own context with respect to equity and air pollution. A lot of which California has taken previously over the years, but Washington put them all into the same policy framework. So essentially addressing climate and local air pollution simultaneously rather than in separate legislation. They also did a lot in legislation to support tribal communities with respect to sort of preferencing tribal offsets and providing financial support to tribes to develop offsets. So there's a lot of sort of newer things maybe sort of built into the Washington program. There was a lot of broad support. I cannot say this was like an environmental justice bill because there was not a lot of support from, the environmental justice community specifically, but there were a lot of, racial equity advocates that supported this, in large part because of all those investment opportunities that Bill was just talking about. And there were business groups that supported, so there's a wide array. Right now the rules are being written, so the policy is not in place yet. It will start in 2023. Let's see, actually, if you want to go to the next slide, yeah, there's a lot of text here, but these are sort of a whole list of the different provisions that are built into the Washington program in terms of making sure that they're responding to some of the criticism heard of the California's program. So Washington is explicitly trying to close the air pollution gap between overburdened and non-overburdened communities. They also created a permanent environmental justice council to advise on investment decisions, but also on market design. So getting to Bill's point about paying attention to the details, they're convening this council who will be able to advise on all of those details as well. And then in the next slide, there's more. The same sort of investment requirements that California has, a minimum of 35%. In practice, California has been closer to 50%. So Washington has the stretch goal there, and I think could probably exceed that as well. They also have offset limitations for polluters, what we might term some of the really bad actors in overburdened communities that they could potentially have their offset use even further limited. And so I guess I would just say, in general, I think Washington has tried to be really responsive to some of the concerns raised about the cap and invest approach while designing a program that looks like California's and learns from California. And of course, delivers greenhouse gas emission reductions at the speed and scale required. So I'm very interested to see how Washington implements their rules over the next year or so.
Great, thank you. I guess we can close those slides out now. And next, okay, great. I was going to say I saw the question in the chat, but I wanted to give Jack and Bill a question because building off the themes from California and Washington. I was wondering what your reaction is to thinking of implementing a statewide cap and invest program to try, I guess, as a complementary policy to help these states achieve their carbon emissions goals. If your gut reaction is that it's good, bad, maybe some cautions. Bill or Jack, any thoughts on how that would look or if that would be able to happen in Maine or Pennsylvania?
When you say statewide, you're referring to addressing other than electric generation, Erin?
Yes.
I know in Pennsylvania, there is legislation is being introduced to extend RGGI or the similar cap and invest to other sectors of the economy. that's being introduced by a Democrat who, comes from a very progressive area of the state, and has also been pushing that Pennsylvania should go toward set a target of 100% renewable, which Pennsylvania now is probably the most, of all the Northeast states, I think Pennsylvania has the least ambitious renewable energy targets of any state in the Northeast. So, I think that it's probably not going to go anywhere, at least under the current legislative makeup that we have. But I would love to see it extended to other sectors as well as power generation. But I think for Pennsylvania, that's sort of a pipe dream right now.
Thank you. Jack?
Yeah, I think a specific economy-wide cap and invest system would be a real challenge in Maine right now. I think one of the things that we as NRCM were tracking and hopeful for was the development of TCI, the Transportation and Climate Initiative, which, if folks aren't familiar, is a cap and invest system that covers the transportation system, not economy-wide, but was sort of consciously designed to build from RGGI, involving some of the same states that were involved in RGGI. We believe in Maine and in many of the New England states anyway, where we don't have very much coal generation anymore, transportation has sort of taken the spot of the biggest sector polluter. We really need revenue to be able to address that transportation problem, to help with the EV transition and some of the upfront costs of that, but also to build out some of the transit investments that we need in certain parts of Maine, and figure out how to get functional transit solutions that serve the big swaths of rural Maine where there aren't sort of big dense populations. But unfortunately, I think the recent surge in fossil fuel prices again and gas prices has really made it politically difficult to talk about a program that would have some price impacts, even though on an overall cost benefit test, evaluation, might be beneficial overall. I think though that's just going to be a really difficult sell politically for folks, and certainly that's the case here in Maine.
Great, thank you. And I want to acknowledge that we got one question specific to heat pumps in Maine, Jack. I don't know if you can answer it in less than a minute.
All right,
but
I can try.
Okay.
I can try. Short, very, very quickly.
Yeah, and then we're going to go right to Captain. Go ahead. Yes, go.
The newest heat pumps function really well in cold climates. They start to lose their efficiency as you get down to about 20 below. So in some parts of Maine, and I think as it's a new technology, there's a lot of wood stoves and backup heat that people do use. I should note that heat pump goal isn't necessarily whole house heat pumps. Also, some of those are mini splits, and those are supplemental as people work towards electrification and replacing and offsetting fossil fuel use. But the short answer is the newest model heat pumps really do function well in the cold climates.
Thank you so much for that quick answer. And now I'm going to dive us back into Cap and Invest programs. And this is Caitlin and Jack. I think this will be our last question. But I actually wanted to specifically ask both of you, because you're in states that have been in Cap and Invest for a very long time. What, if any, changes in implementation or investment have you seen as the program has grown, or has learned, I guess, from past iterations of itself? Caitlin, do you want to start us?
Sure. I mean, I think the two biggest things, I mentioned the creation of AB 617. That's a big one. I mean, sort of recognizing that cap and trade isn't designed to reduce local air pollution, and the state needs to do more to reduce local air pollution. I think the other piece is, those investment minimums for overburdened communities, that was not initially part of the Cap and Invest program in the state. That was legislation that came later. as the environmental justice community, organized and advocated to get that revenue in their communities. So, and we've just seen that number increase over time. So I think those are probably two of the biggest things. I think going forward, we're very interested to see, like I mentioned at the end, a more stringent emissions cap, fewer allowances issued to make sure that we are accelerating the rate of our emission reductions.
Yeah, I think for our part, we're a relatively small state in the context of RGGI. So with that being said, I think what we've seen in Maine over time is that when the LePage administration looked to potentially pull Maine out of RGGI, we were able to successfully push that back, I think, because of the recognition that people had of the good work that had been done with those funds. And I think also Efficiency Maine, as the recipient of that, has been really, really responsible and effective. And what we've seen, this is sort of not necessarily related to RGGI, but part of the impact of that funding is that they've been entrusted with a lot of these other funds as well. Some of the COVID relief funds are being put through Efficiency Maine towards different efficiency programs, like I mentioned, the VW settlement and a number of other funding sources as well. So I think that speaks to the value that people see of this investment. But I do think there's more progress to be made on RGGI. I mean, I think in the last auction, they hit the cost containment cap, which is a little bit of a nerdy term, but essentially keeps the prices of the permits from rising, which actually also puts a cap on the revenues to some extent. And we'd like to see, we think probably raising that cap is probably a good idea to let more of those funds flow back. And I think there's also a current program review happening, and there are a lot of groups that are arguing for some changes to the program based on equity and other things as that goes as well. So always more to be done.
Yes, and yeah, thank you for finishing off with the program review. I was going to highlight as we wrap the webinar, for those of you that are interested or want to maybe get involved in Cap and Invest on some level, RGGI is going through a program review right now, and that means that they're going to look at how the program is implemented. And I also do want to shout out to Bill's group Power, and also there was a comment submitted from Pennsylvania Fence Line Communities that specifically focuses on how RGGI can embed equity, and he did not get to talk about it today, but it will be in the slides, and we'll also be sure to send a link around if anyone is interested. And with that, I would like to thank you all so much for joining me today and presenting on this great topic. And yes, so thank you, and that will conclude our webinar.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you, Erin and Chase.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll stay in touch.
Yes.